Okay, so think about the last video game you played. Um, I bet you probably ran into dozens, maybe even hundreds
Yeah.
of those non-player characters. You know NPCs.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, right? I mean,
Yep.
they kind of make those game worlds feel a lot more alive.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be real. Sometimes those conversations you have with them, they can feel kind of limited. Like you're stuck in this weird loop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they only have a handful of things they can say.
Yeah, totally. It's like you hit a button and they just spit out the same old line.
Yeah. It's like you're talking to a robot.
For years, NPCs have been trapped in these like pre-programmed scripts. They don't really have any genuine adaptability, you
Yeah.
know, and they definitely don't remember anything from your past conversation.
Right. Like you can't build a real relationship with them.
Right.
Like every time you talk to them, it's like starting from scratch.
Exactly. I mean, there have been some cool developments over the years. Like, remember Damien Isla's behavior trees in Halo 2? That was a big step forward.
Yeah.
The NPCs started to react more dynamically to what was happening around them,
Uh-huh.
but they still lacked that real memory, you know, that sense of history with the player.
Yeah.
But now things are starting to change. I mean, we're seeing some really exciting developments in AI, especially with these large language models, LLMs like ChatGPT. I mean, these things have the potential to completely revolutionize how NPCs work.
Right. So now, instead of just being stuck with those same old lines,
Mm.
like now we're talking about characters who can actually understand what you're saying, respond in a natural way, like they're really having a conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about reacting to a button press anymore. It's about understanding the intent behind your words
Mhm.
and tailoring the response accordingly. It's like, think about an NPC who can really grasp the meaning of what you're saying and give you a response that feels, you know, more organic and connected to your choices as a player.
That's amazing.
Huh?
It's like they're actually thinking, like they have a brain.
Yeah. And there's some really cool research out there that shows just how powerful these LLMs can be for creating believable NPCs. Like there's this study by Zhao and another one by Galata. They both looked at how to use LLMs to generate more dynamic and context-rich dialogue. And their findings were really impressive. Like they showed that by fine-tuning these LLMs on a huge amount of game narrative data, you can create NPCs that can adapt to different situations, like really respond to what's happening in the game. And they can have conversations that feel so much more natural. You know, it's not just that if you say this, they say that kind of thing anymore.
Yeah. So we're moving away from that old model, where it's like a really basic script
Uh-huh.
to something that's way more dynamic and intelligent.
Right.
So, but you mentioned earlier that there's a challenge here. And I think this is what we're really going to dive into today.
Mhm.
Like, what's the biggest hurdle when it comes to giving these AI-powered NPCs a truly believable presence?
Yeah, the big challenge is memory,
Mm,
specifically long-term memory. Like LLMs are great at generating responses in the moment, you know, based on what you just said to them.
right.
But they often struggle to remember things from earlier interactions.
Right.
Like, let's say you're playing a big RPG like Stardew Valley,
Mm-hmm.
where you have these ongoing relationships with the characters. You might talk to a villager every day for weeks or months in game time. But if that villager was powered by a standard LLM, they'd probably forget everything you talked about before.
Right.
It could be like every conversation was starting fresh.
Oh, totally.
And that just breaks the immersion, you know? It's
Yeah.
like the NPCs have amnesia or something. And there's a lot of research that's pointed out this limitation with LLMs. Like Panwar has done some really important work in this area, highlighting how the lack of long-term memory can really impact the believability of NPCs.
Yeah. It just ruins the whole illusion. Like the
Yeah.
feeling that you're really interacting with these characters in a meaningful way
Yeah.
and they're living their lives, remembering things. It kind of takes away from the whole experience.
Yeah.
Like they hit the reset button every time you walk away.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's not just about remembering specific facts or events either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like true human interaction is much more nuanced than that.
Mm-hmm.
It involves forgetting less important things over time, holding on to the key information, being able to summarize past events to inform present responses, like reacting in a way that feels consistent with a shared history.
Right. Like you said, it's that nuance.
Yeah,
That makes an NPC feel less like a program and more like a person you know.
exactly. And that brings us to what we're talking about today.
Okay, so let's talk about memory repository. That's the big focus of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
So what is memory repository?
Memory repository. Well, it's a brand new memory system specifically designed for LLMs being used for AI NPCs. And the whole idea behind it, it's to mimic how human memory actually works.
Okay.
So instead of just storing every single detail,
Yeah.
memory repository allows AI NPCs to gradually forget less important short-term memories. But at the same time, they hold on to the key information, they summarize it, and they store that for the long term.
So it's not just about having like a bigger hard drive, It's
Yeah.
not just about cramming in more memories. It's about actually prioritizing,
Yeah.
filtering, condensing the information.
Yeah, exactly. It's about having a system that can sort through the information and decide what's important to keep
Right.
and what can be safely forgotten, just like our brains do.
Yeah.
And this process is crucial for a couple of reasons. Like, first of all, it allows for those sustained interactions over time,
Okay.
like remembering those long-term relationships and storylines we were talking about,
Right.
by efficiently managing the LLM's processing capacity. But even more importantly, this selective forgetting and summarizing, it really contributes to making the NPCs feel more realistically human in their interactions. Like, they're not going to be these perfect recall machines.
Right.
They'll have a sense of what's important, what can fade into the background, and that makes them feel so much more believable.
Okay, so how does it actually work? Like, what are the main parts of this memory repository system?
So it has three main parts: the memory room, memory interaction, and the memory renewal mechanism.
Okay.
So the memory room, think of this as the NPC's brain, where they store all their memories.
Okay.
And it's divided into two areas, just like our own brains: a short-term memory room and a long-term memory room.
Okay, makes sense.
The short-term memory room, this is where the NPC keeps all the recent stuff, like detailed information from the last few turns of your conversation. But it has a limited capacity, right? So older memories have to be cleared out to make space for new ones. And these memories are all indexed by conversation. So it's like they're organized by each interaction you have. Then there's the long-term memory room.
Okay.
This is where those broader, less detailed summaries of past interactions go. It's got a much bigger capacity, And it's designed for those memories to stick around for a longer time. So the short-term memory is for that immediate back and forth.
Right.
But the long-term memory, that builds up the whole history of your relationship with the NPC.
It's like the difference between remembering what you had for breakfast this morning
Yeah.
versus remembering like your 10th birthday party, right?
Yeah, exactly. So short-term is for the nitty-gritty details. Long-term is for those big picture memories that shape who you are.
Makes sense.
Now, the second key part of memory repository is memory interaction.
Okay.
So this is how the NPC actually uses all those memories they've stored. It's how they access the information. And for this, memory repository uses something called the Interactive Dual Tower DSSM, or IDDSSM for short.
IDDSSM. Okay.
Now, I know that sounds kind of complicated. So it did.
But basically, think of it as a super advanced search system.
Okay.
Like that helps the NPC quickly find the most relevant memories from their past.
Yeah.
But it's not just based on keywords,
Right.
It actually takes into account the meaning of what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
it really understands the context.
So it's not just like a simple keyword search, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's not just matching words. It's actually trying to figure out what you mean. And then it pulls up the memories that are most relevant to that meaning.
Okay.
And it does this using a really clever architecture, this dual tower architecture. It's really effective at understanding the relationships between different pieces of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also uses this thing called approximate nearest neighbor indexing, or ANNI, which is kind of similar to the technology that powers those, really fast search engines like Google.
Oh, wow.
So it's really efficient.
Mm.
And it allows the NPC to retrieve all those relevant memories super quickly
Mm-hmm.
based on the current conversation.
Okay. So IDDSSM. It's like the NPC's personal librarian, right? Yeah.
It helps them sift through all those memories, find the right book, so to speak, and pull out the information that's most relevant to what you're talking about.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, this IDDSSM system, it can even be fine-tuned for different types of conversational AI. So it's really adaptable. Now, the third part of memory repository, and that's the memory renewal mechanism.
Memory renewal mechanism.
And this is where things get really interesting. This is where the whole forgetting and remembering thing actually happens. And it's actually two processes happening at the same time.
Okay.
The memory forgetting mechanism
Okay.
and the memory enhancement mechanism.
Got it. So let's break those down. Like, how does the forgetting part work? Because I think we all wish we could forget certain things more easily sometimes.
Right. Well, for the AI, it's all about selectively letting go of those less important details from the short-term memory room
Hmm.
over time.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to remember every single thing you said, just the important stuff. And this forgetting process, it's managed by something called a scheduling policy, which is basically a set of rules that determine which short-term memories are less likely to be needed in the future. And those memories can be safely discarded. It's like the NPC's way of tidying up their mental desktop, you know,
Uh-huh.
getting rid of those temporary files so their brain can focus on what's important right now.
It's like decluttering your mind.
Exactly. Now, working alongside this forgetting mechanism is the memory enhancement mechanism. And this is where the key information from the short-term memory gets summarized and moved into that long-term memory room. So the system looks at, say, the last 10 turns of dialogue, extracts the main points, and then adds that condensed summary to the long-term memory.
So it's like taking notes, right?
Yeah,
Like highlighting the key takeaways from a conversation and writing them down in a more permanent notebook.
exactly. And at the same time, those less important details from the short-term memory, they start to fade away.
So it's a continuous cycle, right?
Uh-huh.
You're capturing the essence of those recent interactions,
Yeah.
but then you're letting the less important specifics drift away.
Exactly. And the paper actually shows this really cool formula to illustrate how this whole memory system works.
Yeah, I saw that. It's M equals M meta plus ML plus Ms.
Right. So M represents the total memory of the NPC, and meta is like the core personality of the NPC,
Mhm.
which stays constant. ML is the long-term memory, and Ms is the short-term memory.
Right. It's like a recipe for a believable NPC.
Right. It shows how those different parts all contribute to the whole. And this summarizing process, it kicks in after a certain number of conversation turns, and the older, more detailed short-term memories, they get cleared out to make room for new interactions. It's this constant balancing act between forgetting and remembering. And that's what makes the memory system feel so organic, so human-like.
So all of this sounds really amazing in theory.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. But we need proof. We need evidence.
Yeah.
So what's the real-world proof that this actually works? The paper talks about this thing called Star Universe. What is that?
So Star Universe is this like a simulated game environment that the researchers created
Okay.
to test memory repository. They populated it with NPCs, and they fine-tuned some LLMs, both an open-source LLM called ChatGLM
Uh-huh.
and the closed-source ChatGPT. They trained these LLMs using a data set of like 50,000 dialogues to make the NPCs in Star Universe more interesting,
Okay.
give them more to talk about. And then they did two types of evaluations, qualitative and quantitative.
Makes sense. So qualitative is more about like the overall experience.
Yeah, exactly. Like how natural and coherent the conversations felt, how engaging they were. They had real people interact with these NPCs
Uh-huh.
and compare the ones using memory repository to the ones that didn't, just to get a feel for how much of a difference it made.
Okay, so what do they find?
Well, the feedback was really positive. Like the people who talked to the NPCs with memory repository, they said the conversations felt much more consistent. The NPCs' responses actually made sense in the context of what had been said before.
So it was a noticeable improvement.
Yeah, definitely. And then on the quantitative side, they really wanted to measure how much the memory was actually improved. So they simulated interactions over a 10-day period.
Wow, 10 days.
Yeah, with these virtual user personas, each with their own unique characteristics, all generated by ChatGPT, by the way.
Okay.
And then to test the NPCs' memories, they came up with this set of 400 exploratory questions to see how well the NPCs could remember past events and how relevant their responses were.
Okay, so they really put those memories through the ringer.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure it was a thorough test.
So what were the main findings from all of this?
Well, first of all, they showed that memory repository actually works, right? It's a viable approach to improving NPC memory. And then their analysis showed that memory repository really did improve the AI NPCs in 4 key areas: memory retrieval accuracy, how human-like their interactions felt, contextual coherence, and answer correctness.
So it wasn't just a feeling, right? They had the numbers to back it up.
Yeah. Now, the paper also highlights some specific examples that really bring this to life. Like, there's one scenario called How to Become a Jedi Master. Have you heard about
I
this?
did, yeah. I read about this one in the paper. I think this really highlights that long-term memory capability.
Oh, right. Exactly. So in this scenario, a user asks an NPC, how do I become a Jedi Master?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Simple question. But then they have a bunch of other conversations with the NPC, completely unrelated to becoming a Jedi Master, just everyday stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then after all that, they ask the NPC again if it remembers the original question.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the NPC with memory repository, it
Yeah,
remembers.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's able to recall that initial question and give a relevant response. But the standard LLM, the one without memory repository, it had completely forgotten about it.
That's wild.
Yeah, it really shows you how much of a difference memory repository makes. And then there's another example. Hello, Anakin Skywalker. I'm Luke Skywalker. This one is so cool. It really gets to the heart of those human-like interactions.
Yeah, this is the one that really stuck with me. Like,
Yeah.
it just blew my mind how much more natural and believable the NPC's response was with memory repository.
Right. So in this scenario, you have an NPC playing the role of Anakin Skywalker. And someone comes up to them and says, hello, Anakin Skywalker. I'm Luke Skywalker.
Uh-huh.
Pretty straightforward. But the standard LLM, it gives this really generic response like, hello there.
It's so robotic, right?
Yeah. It's totally devoid of any emotional depth or recognition of who Luke is. But the NPC with memory repository,
Okay.
its response is completely different. It's like, Luke, my
Mm.
son. And it even says things like, I'm proud of you, and now the Force be with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the chills. It actually recognizes Luke, and it understands the significance of that relationship.
Yeah, it's amazing. It shows how much memory repository can enhance the emotional depth and personalization of those NPC interactions.
Okay, so I think we've established that memory repository can create some seriously impressive results. But let's dig into the nitty-gritty of the quantitative analysis. Like, what were the specific metrics they used to measure performance, and what did the numbers actually tell them?
Okay, so they used 4 main metrics: memory retrieval accuracy, response correctness, contextual coherence, and human-like interaction.
Okay, break those down for me.
So memory retrieval accuracy, that's basically how good the NPC is at finding relevant memories from the past.
Uh-huh.
Response correctness, that's how accurate their answers are to the questions you ask them. Contextual coherence, that's how well their responses fit into the current conversation. Like, do they make sense based on what's been said before? And then, of course, there's the human-like interaction metric, which measures how natural and believable the NPC's responses feel.
Okay, got it. And how do they score these metrics?
Well, they used a scale, of course,
Right.
and they actually ran these experiments on a pretty powerful setup, too. They used a local multi-GPU server,
Yeah.
to really push the limits of these models. They tested with 3 different LLMs, ChatGLM, GPT 3.5, and GPT 4. And for the data, they used a mix of publicly available NPC dialogue data and their own custom set of 400 validation questions, like those exploratory questions we talked about before.
Oh, wow. So this was like a serious research project.
Oh, yeah. They went all out. And when they compared the performance of the LLMs with memory repository to those without, the results were really interesting.
Okay, what do they find?
Well, one of the most surprising things was that memory repository didn't actually improve the correctness of the answers that much.
That's unexpected.
Yeah. And in some cases, it actually made the raw memory retrieval accuracy a bit worse.
So the NPCs were slightly less accurate at remembering specific details.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. The researchers think this is because memory repository prioritizes important information over every tiny detail.
Okay.
It's not trying to remember everything perfectly. It's trying to remember what matters most.
Right, so it's more about understanding the big picture than remembering every single word.
Exactly. And you know what? That trade-off actually makes sense.
It does.
Because what they found was that memory repository led to some huge improvements in contextual coherence.
Oh, okay, so the conversations were flowing better.
Exactly. The NPCs were staying on topic. Their responses were more relevant to what was being said. And this was especially true for the ChatGLM model, which suggests that those summaries generated by memory repository, they really do help to keep the conversation focused and meaningful.
So it's like memory repositories helping the LLMs to think more clearly.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the really exciting part. The memory repository led to some huge progress in simulating human-like interaction over time. And this is something that those baseline LLM models just couldn't do.
Okay, so the NPCs were actually starting to behave more like real people.
Yeah, they weren't just giving canned responses. They were reacting in a way that felt more natural, more consistent with their past experiences. And of the 3 LLMs they tested, GPT-4 generally performed the best,
Okay.
followed by GPT 3.5 and then ChatGLM.
So it seems like there's definitely a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a slight dip in perfect recall,
Mm.
but a huge boost in conversations that feel More natural, more human. And to me, that seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I'd say so. And they actually compared memory repository to another memory system called MemGPT.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's another popular approach.
Right.
And they found that while MemGPT performed similarly in terms of correctness and coherence, it actually scored slightly better in terms of raw memory retrieval.
That
But memory repository had a way higher score for human-like interaction.
Interesting. So even though MemGPT was a bit better at remembering specific details, Memory Repository was better at making the NPCs feel more human?
Yeah, and the researchers think this difference comes down to memory repository's ability to forget and summarize.
Got it. So it's not just about how much you remember, but how you remember.
Right. And finally, they also tested how well memory repository worked with different settings for the LLMs themselves, like things like temperature and top.
Okay, remind me what those do again.
So temperature and top, they basically control how random and creative the LLM's output is.
Huh?
Like a higher temperature means the LLM will be more unpredictable. It'll take more risks.
Okay.
And they found that increasing the temperature generally led to a decrease in memory retrieval performance. But memory repository's impact, it stayed pretty consistent.
So it was still effective, even when the LLM was being more creative.
Yeah, exactly. The top parameter had less of an effect on retrieval, but interestingly, higher temperatures actually led to a decrease in the correctness of the answers. But here's the twist. Correctness improved as the conversation went on.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, and overall, memory repository's performance was really stable across all these different settings.
So no matter how you tweak those parameters, Memory Repository still delivers.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is awesome because it means it's a really robust system.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our deep dive here.
Uh-huh.
Can you just remind us what the main takeaway is? Like, what's the big deal about Memory Repository? Why should people be excited about it?
The big takeaway is that memory repository is this brand new approach to NPC memory. That's inspired by how human memory works. It allows NPCs to forget less important information and summarize key details for the long term. And this leads to some seriously impressive results. Richer dialogue, more consistent characters, and interactions that feel way more human-like. The best part is, it works with a whole bunch of different LLMs, both open source and closed source.
Right, so it's not limited to just one type of AI.
Exactly. And if you think about the future, I mean, this could really change how we interact with NPCs in games. Imagine game worlds where those characters actually remember you. You know? Like they have a history with you, and their personalities and relationships with you, they evolve over time.
Yeah, like those characters become real people.
Right, and that just makes for a way more immersive and believable experience.
So as we wrap up, here's a thought for you all out there listening. How will these truly human-like AI NPCs change our experience not just in games, but in all sorts of interactive media? And maybe even beyond.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. What happens when AI can learn and forget just like we do? When they can build a real history with us? It's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it makes you wonder what the future holds.
Exactly. And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, right? Exploring these exciting possibilities. So thank you for listening, everyone,
Thanks.
and we'll see you next time.